Hi, and welcome to Total Rewind, a Filmmakers Compass podcast where me, D-Man, and CP, we take a look at movies from 30 years and before. And today we're really excited because we're actually doing our first non-80s movie. So throw it over to you, CP. How's it going over there?
I'm great, man. How are you? I love this movie, and I'm so excited we finally get to talk about it.
Well, I'm happy that we're finally getting to the before part of our tagline. So I'm really excited, and I'll go ahead and announce the movie. It's Jaws, Steven Spielberg. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, dude, it's pretty crazy because we've actually been a little bit on a Spielberg kick, I guess. And here he is again with another instant classic. I think Jaws is actually considered the first blockbuster. Am I correct?
Yeah, something interesting. Universal actually decided to release it nationwide all in the same weekend, and it was the first movie they ever did that with.
Interesting.
Otherwise, like the release was kind of rolled out from city to city over the course of a couple weeks. So yeah,
interesting. Yeah, because I know, kind of once something happens twice, then it's like a thing. So like technically Star Wars is the one that everyone was like, oh, blockbusters. But Jaws was really the first summer movie that made that type of money and is now, regarded as kind of the first blockbuster.
Yeah.
So pretty cool. And I'm really excited to talk about it. Obviously, this is Total Rewind. So the goal of this podcast is for CP and myself to take a look at movies from 30 years and before and see if they're still relevant in 2021 and beyond. So, is this a movie that we would show to our kids? So I'll throw it over to you first. Let's look at Jaws. Culturally, is it still relevant?
Oh my gosh. Can you even ask me that question with a straight face?
I could not.
I mean, for one thing, right, this is the film that puts Steven Spielberg on the map as a filmmaker. If you get the chance, go back. There's a lot of great documentaries and special features about the making of this film. Universal, Spielberg himself thought it was going to be a disaster. He was afraid he would never work again as a filmmaker. Yet when it was all finally cut together, it ended up being this real masterpiece of cinema, which not only jump-started his career and made him blow up to be, the greatest director ever,
right?
But on top of it, aside from being the first blockbuster, as you said, what's really amazing about the film is the impact.
True.
People were afraid to go in the water. And
now, I wasn't alive, so I can't speak to exactly what that must have been like, but to see this movie and then have this kind of, carnal fear of sharks and going into the water, it was very real. That was my understanding.
Well, and I mean, right? Like now people go to the beach today and someone makes a Jaws joke. People hear that Jaws theme, they know exactly what the reference is, that man-eating shark. It's actually funny. I was watching a interview with Spielberg where he was talking with his buddy John Milius, and they were on vacation together in Hawaii. And nice. He said, hey, Steven, are you going to go in the water? Like, it's perfect day. And he's like, nope, no way. He's like, they know what I did, and I'm a marked man, and they're waiting for me. So the movie was so impactful that Steven Spielberg himself will not go back in the water.
That's a great irony, especially, I mean, you'd think maybe, he put sharks on the map, but I guess in a bad way. So maybe they'd want to be friends with him, but I guess not. I mean, what's interesting too is like when you look culturally at Jaws, obviously there's the theme song, there's the two notes, the ba-dum, 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 everybody hears that, they know that. And then, in a weird way, Jaws is never thought of as a holiday movie, but I guess technically it is, right? It always gets played on 4th of July weekend. And so its relevance, like it's one of those, we talked before, which holiday or which 4th of July movies did you watch this weekend? It's like Independence Day, Jaws, and like The Sandlot. Those are kind of like your go-tos. But as it is, there are 4th of July movies, just like there's, I guess, Christmas or Halloween, And so,
very true.
Yeah, Jaws, fits in there. So it gets replay value every single year. In fact, I forget what channel it was on for a long time. They had a Jaws marathon, although, we're only talking about the original, but the drop in quality once you start going up in numbers is, do you think, on that note, Jaws is still relevant? Do you think they'll make another one or remake it or something?
It's kind of interesting. I feel like maybe Universal thinks that they have milked the franchise for all that they could. I mean, the first one, right, was incredibly over budget and almost 3 times the budget. It ended up being made for about $9 million. It brought in close to 5 million, or 5 million, 500 million in the box office. Big difference.
I was going to say, I was like, $5 million. Wow.
And I mean, obviously, the franchise has been huge, but the other 3 Jaws movies, everyone just gets worse and worse and worse. And I wonder if they're just like, you know what, hey, we milked this thing for everything we could. We still have this film that really stands the test of time.
It does.
Like why bother going back? Especially since, the other remakes, which maybe we should talk about this on the other show at some point, the other remakes just really don't hold up. And I think part of it is they get really insistent on showing the shark more than Spielberg did.
Which is ironic because the reason for that was due to technical issues, correct?
Well,
it wasn't necessarily this kind of like proactive artistic choice, which now everybody knows kind of that, like, what do you call it? Like the Jaws effect. Like you withhold showing the monster, quote unquote, for more dramatic effect because our imaginations are crazier than seeing it.
Spielberg himself has actually credited it, saying like not being able to see the shark made the film better. And originally he envisioned this much more of like a Godzilla type movie with, this monster attacking this town. And he said very quickly he learned when they were out on the ocean shooting and this thing just kept failing and failing and failing. He said, hey, I'm not making Godzilla anymore. Now I'm making a Hitchcock movie. And so he kind of reimagined how to shoot the film as Hitchcock would have done it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's, like you said, there's been documentaries and this and that. It's fun watching some of those clips. Like they literally went out on the water and like they needed one shot at like a specific light. And they only had like a very small window to film when they were out on the water. And it's very expensive to get out there. It's hard. The shots get messed up. And they literally went and did it like time and time again to get one shot. And it wasn't even like, if you watch the movie, it's not even like this iconic shot. It's just like a shot.
Well, and it's crazy. And they talked about just right, because they had a whole fleet of boats with them. And one of them had power and one of them was running camera and one of them was kind of the workshop. And so they talked about just the whole, and one of them was just for the shark. And so they said, not only, did it take 2 hours just to reset everything for a single shot, but then they had to juggle weather, waves, and of course, sailboats sailing across the horizon because, you can't shoot Jaws when, a bunch of people go by all happy on their 100-foot sailboat.
It's supposed to be, man-eating shark out there. Well, and it's also worth noting, culturally too, that I do believe it's still there. Some of the rides have been swapped out at Universal, but I believe on the, what's it called? The backlot tour or whatever it is, Jaws is still part of that ride. And I always thought, what a cool job. You think like the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland, but the guy that's like, he's like, oh no, and he like pulls out his like fake gun and then like fires it and like there's an explosion. I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
I don't know what that guy gets paid. He's probably an actor too,
Probably. Funny bit of trivia I did learn, when we were kind of brushing up on the film. I guess originally before they decided to build the mechanical shark, the producers wanted to train a great white shark.
Wow, that does not sound wise.
I know. I'm just like, maybe they just didn't know all that we know about sharks now, but does that sound like the worst idea in human history?
Well, it's interesting. We brought this up with Indiana Jones in regards to what's it called? Archaeology. And then Jurassic Park was paleontology. The interest in sharks after Jaws also grew dramatically.
True.
Now we have things like Shark Week. And, it's weird because even you watch Shark Week, I mean, it's almost impossible to watch one of those shows without a Jaws reference.
No, in fact, they're named like Laws of Jaws and when Jaws attacks and stuff, right? Like,
yeah, like it's hard not to see its influence all over the place. I mean, Shark Week, literally, the interest in sharks is probably, if you traced it right back to Jaws, you'd be like, yep, this is the inspiration. This is why we get to have a whole week about sharks. So
Thank you, Spielberg.
Yeah, thank you, Spielberg. Let's go ahead and jump then to effects. So obviously we mentioned the score already. It's iconic. It definitely stands the test of time. I'm sure if they were to make a list of, well, first of all, just John Williams' best scores, it's on there. But I mean, just, movie themes in general, that's got to be up there as one of the most recognizable ones.
Absolutely.
But how do you think the effects hold up? So like you said, this was filmed in the 70s. They were having tons of technical issues when it came to the shark and some of the mechanics and everything. Do you think this movie, effects wise, holds up and stands the test of time?
That's kind of a loaded question, in the sense that there's really two parts to the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say for the first 2/3 of the movie, they stand up amazing. We see shadows, we see fins, we watch people, get mauled by sharks and blood flood the screen. And it looks really well because out of necessity, it was used so sparingly. In fact, to the point that Spielberg even went to the art department and he said, guys, no red. Like, all the red we're showing is simply the blood for effect. And it looks really good. And it holds up really well. Obviously, in the latter half of the film, which, spoilers, when the shark finally jumps on the boat and starts eating people in the close-up and it starts sinking the orca, it's not as
I kind of have
timeless.
To agree. Yeah, after watching it, especially just this overall, like, when you think of the fear of the shark, even seeing it kind of like, beached on the orca.
Yeah.
It doesn't, part of me is like, just don't go over there, or, hope this boat doesn't sink. But generally speaking, I'm like, it's just sitting there, kind of like, if you take a fish out of water, like, as intimidating as it can be and as powerful as it can be when it's in water, once it's out of water, it's not that intimidating.
Yeah. And
I don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. Once we really get the close-ups and we look at the quote unquote doll's eyes that they talk about, it doesn't have the same effect as when, we see the barrels, circling the boat.
Exactly. So, I mean, I would say, like you said, as far as like the blood effects, everything else, to me, obviously there's no digital effects here. This is all practical effects.
Yeah.
Worth mentioning. But generally, I think it all holds up. It was really just, and that end sequence where I was like, if I had to be honest with myself, even though I love this sequence and I love the movie overall, we could be honest with ourselves. It's not necessarily the best.
Yeah.
So, and then as far as the story goes, like, let's go ahead and talk about the characters and the story, because obviously there's a lot more here than just the shark. I think the story holds up remarkably well. So you have the politics of a small, island town. They created kind of a fictional, a place that people know, Amity, and they do a good job with the different characters. So you have like the three main characters, and they all have something that they want, whether it's protecting the town and safety, whether it's, to learn more about sharks, or to finally get, to bag your beast. I think they do a good job of setting up the stakes for each of the characters, and it adds to the tension that is on the boat when they're out there later. They have that great conversation, where they're all talking about where they got their scars. And, that scene is just a great scene from an actor's standpoint. It's probably everything an actor ever dreams of. You get to tell your long, crazy story. And obviously the reference to is it the USS Indianapolis?
Yeah.
Which actually happened. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's a true story.
Yeah, which is even scarier. I think like they said, like, I don't know, whatever he says, like 1,100 people went into the water and only like 300 came out or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is crazy. And like, it wasn't all just like, shark feeding, but the sharks were there, and I'm sure a bunch of people did get eaten by sharks. You're like, that's just terrifying. That's actually probably more terrifying than like Jaws is. Just thinking like your boat sinks and you're stuck with all these other people and people are just getting eaten. That's wild.
Yeah.
But I think, the characters, the way it's written, it really allows for that tension on the boat, where especially I think someone's radioing or something, and then Quint is like, he just like throws water on the radio and is like, F this or whatever. And they're like, why would you ever do that? Like, you're such an idiot. And he's like, no, because like we have to bag this shark. We can't bail on this mission. And I don't know. I just love the tension between the characters. I think it's fun. Obviously, the small town politics was fun too. Kind of the beginning of the movie, like, should we shut things down? All that. I think it all holds up though remarkably well. It's very realistic. story. And you probably know this better than I do. Jaws is based on a book, right?
Yeah, Peter Benchley, and it
Was
was
it called
actually
Jaws?
it was called Jaws, and it was the bestseller in '74. And actually, Universal got a hold of the manuscript before it went into final publication. So they're like, we know this book is coming out. Let's lock down the rights. Let's make this a movie. This is going to be huge. And obviously the book was a bestseller.
They were right. Yeah.
The movie was a blockbuster. I've never read the book. I've heard there's substantial differences between the two, though the original author was actually involved heavily in the early drafts of the movie. I think part of the reason why the story holds up really well is the fact that Spielberg has created characters who have very powerful relationships with sharks. Mm-hmm. First of all, right, the chief of police is terrified
of going in the water.
Going in the water in general. Like, it has nothing to do with sharks. He's just scared of drowning. So, of course, at some point, we're going to have to challenge this character by putting him on a sinking boat where he is forced with the realization that he is about to drown.
Yes.
Brilliant in terms of character growth. Quint, is this man who makes a living hunting sharks, and we don't really ever see why he hates them until we, hear about his story of, 5 days in the ocean, watching his friends get eaten by sharks. Of course you'd hate sharks. And then Matt Hopper is his relationship is a little different. He's fascinated by sharks. He talks about how when he was a boy, how a shark attacked his boat, and since then he's been obsessed with them. He kind of comes at it from this perspective as the scientist who really is bewildered by the discovery of such a massive shark. And so all of these characters are, their story is the story of Jaws, because there's a little piece of the audience in each of them as we, as they embark on their journey and we follow them.
Yeah. And they, like you said, they do challenge all of them to that level of and like I said, it creates that tension between them because each of their motives is not necessarily pure, right? They're not all there to get this shark to protect the town. One of them is. Mm-hmm. The other one wants revenge. The other one wants knowledge. So there's a natural tension on the boat, which I think works really well because it's not just a bunch of friends let's get this bastard.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So yeah, overall, I think the story holds up remarkably well and plays really well. And the perfect example to be able to illustrate why that is just go watch the Jaws sequels and you'll see that they don't hold up. Mm-hmm. Their stories, their characters and their stories just aren't nearly as powerful and impactful. And there's a reason why they're thought of so poorly. Jaws in a weird way, it's how can you keep doing this?
Well, and again, just to elaborate on what we've already talked about, right? When you follow Chief Brody, who is the main character, mm-hmm. It's kind of amazing when Spielberg set him up against really two sharks, right? There's the shark in the water circling the island. And then there's the shark, the shark in the suit, who's the mayor, who mm-hmm. doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that this is a real crisis and is doing everything he can to really handcuff Brody and keep him from doing his job, which is keeping people safe.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, as a holiday movie, the replay value and the way almost everything holds up remarkably well. If we're going to give our final remarks on Jaws, I would give Jaws a pass. I also think Jaws is a great, if you were to show people that were interested in becoming filmmakers, I feel like Jaws is a movie you should show them.
Oh, absolutely.
It's practical effects, but you're seeing, Spielberg, is doing a lot of things that, they teach filmmakers, and he's also having a lot of fun, but it's all, on film. And it's, filming on water. It's having to film outside with light. They're not just on sets, there's all kinds of weird stories. I think you said something about they ended up filming a scene in a swimming pool or something, because that's what they had to do to get it done.
Yeah.
But realistically, yeah, I think it's a movie that holds up remarkably well. And I definitely would say that, is this a movie that's still relevant in 2021? My answer is yes. Jaws is awesome.
I would agree. And I think the last thing is that I'm just going to add on, building on everything you said, is this. Spielberg talked about how he was very deliberate in making sure he cast good actors, but not huge actors. Right. And
point.
Part of that, he said, is, listen, the main character of the film is the shark. And he didn't want to cast someone like Charlton Heston, who was really so grand that we were never going to believe that he wasn't going to be able to beat the shark. We were never going to believe that, this would be a problem for him. And more importantly, he just himself and the presence that he brought was going to overshadow the shark. So he was very deliberate in the people that he picked. And I think that when you add all these things together, and despite the fact that the production itself was such a nightmare, despite the fact that Universal thought it was going to bankrupt the studio, Spielberg thought he was going to be a failure. Richard Dreyfuss very famously said many times, he went in interviews and was like, this movie is going to be such a flop, like it's going to be a disaster. Despite all of the challenging circumstances, it's really the brilliance of Spielberg, the talent of the actors, some really badass effect people, and a solid script that really came together in a way that we hadn't seen in a movie before. And in many ways, we'll never see again, in the sense that the next time someone gets the quote unquote thriller monster movie like Jaws, we're simply going to say, this is like Jaws on an airplane, like Jaws in a, whatever.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, that just goes to show how impactful this movie was in cinema for audiences and for filmmakers. And yeah, you have to appreciate that. And because of that reason alone, I think it's always going to stand the test of time. Yes, there's a lot of people wearing bell bottoms in the movie, but get with it, because it's a fantastic film.
No, I agree. I think it's definitely one that, if you haven't seen Jaws, I recommend checking it out. But if you have, enjoy watching it again, because I did. And it has great rewatching quality.
Absolutely.
So, all right, man. That does it for our episode this week. We wanted to thank everyone for tuning in and checking out all of the episodes of Filmmakers Compass Podcast. You can follow the show at Film Comp Podcast on all major social media channels. And then you can also just go ahead and Google Filmmakers Compass Podcast, and you'll find the links there as well. You can follow me at Big Kid D-Man and Christian at NDCal5. Keep the conversations going. And as we've mentioned on previous episodes, not for every movie, but we do live tweet when we watch some movies. So it wasn't me for Jaws, but I did see that you were doing a little live tweeting while you were watching Jaws. So Thank you, CP. Yeah.
And hey, listen, next week we're going to be talking about Mel Brooks's infamous comedy, Blazing Saddles, another movie from the 70s, and we really hope that you will tune in to check it out as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll be back.
Take care.